Hey everybody, how you doing? This is about to be a really fun video. In this video, we are going to be comparing 223 Remington versus the 243 Winchester cartridges in the context of deer hunting. I don't think anyone would argue with me that the 223 or the 243 are fantastic varmint cartridges. Think coyote, bobcat, groundhogs, so on and so forth. 223 Remington, 243 Winchester. I'm getting tongue-tied today. Awesome cartridges for that. But today we're talking, like I said, the context of deer hunting. Probably more so whitetail hunting. I know a lot of people that take deer with 223 Remington. That's the controversial part of this probably. I know a lot of people that take deer with 243. Myself included. I have not yet taken a whitetail with 223 Remington. I will. I have taken deer with the same bow lot in 22 250, was just a shade bit faster than the 223 Remington. But what I've done, I've taken 5 factory loaded 223 Remington cartridges and 5 243 Winchester cartridges, and we're gonna put all the data on a chart. You guys that watch the show have seen me do this before. It's color-coded where red is the worst and green is the best performing. We're going to put it on a chart, and you guys can track along with whatever factory load is your favorite. Or maybe you'll find a new favorite based on this data, but I'm not going to waste any time. Let's jump right into the numbers. I've got ballistic coefficient, muzzle velocity on all of these. And then we're going to talk real quick about drop at distance. So what is the flattest? And then we're also going to talk about energy at 100-yard increments. So a lot of people say to take a deer, it needs to have at least 1,000 foot-pounds of energy. Is that kind of FUD lore? To some extent, yes. I don't necessarily prescribe to that. If you are extremely accurate, I think we can fudge that a little bit further. All that being said, let's look at the numbers and you can decide what you think about deer hunting with 223 and deer hunting with 243 Winchester. Let's jump into the numbers real quick. So let's pop up that chart of the drop numbers. Like I said, I've got 5 different factory loadings of each. So what's the trend? Just throwing this up here. 100-yard increments out to 1,000 yards. So the green is kind of averaging at the bottom, which is 243 Winchester. I've got the 243s all coated in the yellow there. So generally speaking, 243 drops less. Let's just take a quick look at the drop. So everything's sighted in at 100 yards. At 200 yards, it's pretty constant, guys, as far as drop between the 223 and the 243. Roughly 3-inch drop if you sight it at 100. At 200 yards, if you're just doing holdover 3 inches. Pretty easy to remember. 243, 223, sighted at 100, 200, holdover 3 inches. Across the board, you can take that to the bank. Now, 300 yards, the gap starts to change a little bit, but it's honestly pretty near the same, to where both of those drop a foot at 300 yards. You can pick your different loading there. I've got core locks on here, AccuTip V, which is really marketed as a varmint load. The bullet explode. We got some high performance rifle, Federal Fusion, Federal Trophy Copper. On down the list, you can pick out your favorite one and go down the line, but pretty much across the board for all these. 200 yards, 3-inch drop, 300 yards, a foot drop. There's one, is the 243 AccuTip V, the lightest 243, only drops 9 inches at 300 yards. The worst drops 13 inches, which is a couple of the 223s. So keep that in mind too, whether you're plinking on steel or you are using 223 Remington or 243 to hunt. Sighting at 100, 200 yards, 3-inch holdover, 300 yards, a foothold over. Now that I've got the numbers on these for the drop out to 1,000 yards, you can see the 243 is flatter than the 223 Remington. Now, this is where we get into the hunting a little bit deeper, is when we talk about energy. Actually, first let me pop up that pretty picture. I made the thing, so I might as well put it up there. Here's the arcs in inches with all those different loadings. Some people want to see a picture rather than look at the boring old numbers and color codes. So freeze that right here and look at the drop chart. Now, what is a little bit more relatable when we talk about hunting, we're talking about energy. You want to knock down that whitetail. We want to have the most energy we can, right? Well, this picture of the energy is even more relevant, I guess. You can see all the green is at the bottom, whereas at the top, some of the 223s were flatter than some of the 243s. Well, when we talk about energy, the 243 across the board has more energy. And let me pause real quick, squirrel brain a little bit. Yes, in both 243 and 223, there are higher BC bullets for target, better and flatter at long ranges, but for this context, remember, we're talking about hunting. So I only selected hunting bullets for this video. I do not suggest that you hunt with target rounds. Some places you're allowed to, it's legal. You do whatever floats your boat, but I don't recommend hunting with target rounds. So I didn't put them in here. But yes, somebody will probably comment, you're using the best stuff, there's flatter stuff out there. Yes, there is, but not in a hunting bullet. And we're talking about some Remington and some Federal here that most of y'all are probably familiar with. So back to the energy discussion. So there are a lot of people that subscribe to, you need 1,000 foot-pounds of energy to take a deer, right? We said that earlier. Well, if you look at that, if you want to key off that number, using that as a benchmark, if you're going to hunt with 223 Remington, you need to keep it at 100 yards and in, which for whitetail in the east and in the south, we're taking a lot of our deer inside of 100 yards. So that's not a problem. You're in the woods, 223, boom, take it to the bank. So I would argue if you're hunting with 223 and a good bullet, you could probably say 200 and in is a fair number. If you've practiced and you know exactly where you're going to hit when you squeeze that trigger, as you should with everything, I'd say with 223 you can probably extend it out to 200 and in. I know several people, here where I'm at in my unit, we can take 3 does per day. Yes, 3 whitetail does per day, all season long. And I know people that take their ARs out there, catch whitetail, opening day, boom, 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 and they drop them. They load up the four-wheeler with 3 does, and then they're pretty much done hunting until, they want to go after a buck or see the bucks coming on trail cameras. I know people that do that. So I haven't personally taken a deer with 223 yet, but I know several people that do all the time, and they just mow them down. And again, we're not talking about 400 or 500 yards. We're talking about 100 yards, maybe 200 yards. If you got a good rest, good bullet, so on and so forth. But just to compare the two, if you want to go off that same benchmark of 1,000 foot-pounds, that benchmark with a majority of the 243 rounds is right at 300 or 400 yards. So if you're using that 1,000 foot-pounds of energy benchmark, which we hit at 100 yards for 223, that benchmark is pushed back to 300 or 400 for the 243, depending on which loading you're using. So me personally, I have taken a bunch of deer or guided people on deer using 243. Taking quite a few animals with 243. It drops them. Nobody's going to argue with me that 243 is not a good deer catching round. And I'm going to pop up the chart here too It's more obvious, distinct on this page where the 223s have less energy and then the 243s have more energy. But hey, real quick video, guys. I wanted to put the data on paper. If you have somebody that says, hey, is 223 any good for deer? I would tell you, yes, but within reason, and you got to use a good bow light. Don't go out there with your FMJ 55 grain and catching deer. Like I said, I don't recommend it. Why use a subpar round when you can get a good round? It's just not worth it. It's not worth wounding them or losing them, so on and so forth. You guys know what I'm trying to say. But my advice, 223, yes, it'll take deer. Get as close to them as you can. Get a good rest. 243, nobody's going to argue with me that that's not good for catching deers. But putting the numbers down on paper so I could have them to reference, I'm going to save this in my files. And also, so you guys can take a look at it. There are several of these 223 rounds and 243 that they market as deer catching rounds. They actually print a deer on the picture of the 223 rounds. And then the opposite of that, there's 243s. They put a little squirrel or prairie dog on the box of the 243s. But all that being said, bunch of hunting rounds, factory loads we just talked about. Send this video to your friends. Comment down below what your opinion is. I'm always interested to hear what you guys have to say. But hey, appreciate y'all watching. Homie's out there revving his pickup truck. We'll catch you guys on the next one. Thanks, guys. Hooty-hoo!